Hello, everyone. The time is now 6 o'clock, and it is time for the Resilience Flooding and FEMA Community Rating System webinar. This webinar is being recorded for future reference. It's going to be posted on the city plan website for anyone who is interested in viewing it later, as it is going to be a bit of a timeless reference for people. Now we do have about 16 people registered for the webinar, so I expect more people will be coming on very soon, including several alders and boards and commissioners. So we look forward to discussing the subject at hand with everyone. All right, so we'll start off with a land acknowledgement, as we do with all of our city plan webinars. The land of our state is the territory of the Sequin, including Quinnipiac and Tungus, Mattabesic, Mohegan, Mashantucket, Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Pawgasset, Nipmuc, and the Lenape peoples. These peoples have stewarded this land through many generations. We thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example. Let's see here. There we go. There's our next slide. All right. So first off, we will do welcome and introductions. My name is Jacob Robison. I'm a senior project manager for the New Haven City Plan Department and also the City Plans Department flood manager. So we also have our Director of City Plan on the call, Laura Brown, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Laura Brown, Director of City Plan. So glad to see you all tonight. And thank you for taking time out of your day to be here and to our presenter for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Laura. And we have Diane Ivkovich from the Department of Environmental Energy and Environmental Protection from the state of Connecticut.
Hey, everyone. I hope you can see me. My name is Diane Ivkovich. I work at as Jacob said, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And I've been there about 23 years, and I'm the state's National Flood Insurance Program Coordinator.
Great. Thank you, Diane. So for the rest of our agenda items, we'll have an introduction to City Plan, New Haven's flood risks, actions to prevent flood loss, flood resources, and I'm going to be going over all of those. And then at the end, Diane Ivkovich is going to be talking about the FEMA Community Rating System program, and will also help to answer questions. Great. So very quickly, we'll start by discussing what is planning and how it relates to what we're talking about today. So the goal of planning is to improve the health, safety, and economic well-being of all residents in our communities. This involves thinking about how we must move around the community, how to retain and attract thriving businesses, where we want to live, and opportunities for recreation. Planners take a systems view of community, buildings, road, and green spaces, and considering how they fit together like pieces of a puzzle. And an introduction to your local city plan department. We serve as a regulatory body for land use development, engage the public to develop plans for long-term sustainable growth and development, coordinate with departments and agencies to plan, secure funding, and manage large infrastructure projects, and act as a first point of contact for residents, property owners, developers, entrepreneurs, and business owners. And that's the prime point that we're going to be working with today, and how it relates to resiliency and property owners. All right, so we manage the New Haven zoning code, including all of those commissions and processes that we see on the left here. We're going to be updating our zoning ordinance and other regulatory updates to align with the comprehensive plan, which we're also working on right now. We just had a introductory meeting the other day for anyone in the public who is interested in learning about the process. If you're interested in that, you can contact me later. I will put my email in the chat and we can talk about what is going on with that project. So let's go into flooding and resilience. New Haven has experienced many different types of floods over the years. As many of you are aware and have probably experienced firsthand. So to better protect the city and its residents, we should understand an overview of the city's flood risks, important actions to protecting life and property, and benefits of participating in the FEMA CRS program, which has a mandated reason as to why we're presenting today. So flood risks, what are they? There are rivers in New Haven with a lot of residential uses and commercial uses bordering right on them, and they have been subject to flood loss over the years. There's coastal and storm surge, riverine and coastal combination, nuisance or sunny day tidal flooding, and poor drainage. You can see examples of poor drainage right here on Union Avenue. So as far as some statistics about how this actually plays out in New Haven, there are about 1,500 buildings in the 1% special flood hazard area, which means that there's a 1% chance of flooding happening in that area every year, or the likeliness of flooding is 1 in every 100 years. And that's only growing as climate change continues to ramp up. There are 3,600 people living in those areas. There's almost 900 FEMA policies in force, and a total coverage of over $223 million in flood insurance. So you can see the areas of flood risk here. The special flood hazard area is highlighted in orange on this map, as you can see, which is a pretty significant chunk of New Haven. And that's 1,900 acres of New Haven, or about the size of 1,400 football fields. I like to put that in there to help us understand actually how large that space is. So as I described before, the special flood hazard area is a 100-year flood zone. So possibility is once every 100 years, or 1% annual risk. And the majority of those neighborhoods that make up that special flood hazard area are West River, Quinnipiac River, Mill River, Harbor, and East Shore. All right, so what we can do to prevent flood loss, the very first thing, most important thing, is to know when a flood is likely to happen. So sign up for New Haven alerts if you haven't already. That's if there's one thing to take away from this webinar, it's sign up for New Haven alerts. And I put a tiny link in there for everyone to access it easily. It's tinyurl.com/New Haven alerts. Other things to do to protect yourself and others: avoid flooded areas or downed power lines, and don't drive through flooded areas. I'm sure in the age of social media, everyone has seen recently a car drive through a flooded area, and that is it's not necessary. It's not needed. If there's a flood, I guarantee wherever you're going, it's not worth risking your safety to get through there. Insure your properties. Almost $5 million has been paid to date by FEMA to property owners in New Haven. And that's over $1.5 million paid in premiums. And protect your property. Elevate a residential structure if you can, and flood-proof your commercial properties structures. And if you have questions about that, on how to do that, then the city plan department can help you. More actions to prevent flood loss. Build responsibly. Follow all applicable regulations of the state building code. The building department can help you with that, and city plan can help you work with the building department on that. And as we said before, the city plan department manages a few of the regulatory processes for land use. So make sure you get all of the applicable permits for building and zoning, and other permits that may be applicable to whatever you're building. The New Haven Building Department can advise on necessary measures along with the planning department. Protect natural floodplain functions. The best we can do is allow our floodplain to act as it should naturally. That means build responsibly and use fill judiciously, if at all. Remove materials such as grass clippings, waste, lumber, floatable and hazardous materials from the floodplain, and know steps to take to protect yourself and property. And biggest thing, which New Haven alerts will help you to know, is prepare ahead of time. Know the steps to take to protect yourself and property. Good preparations can improve warning and response time, reduce damages, and increase recovery time. A great resource right here is the city plan flood page. I put a tiny URL at the bottom here for everyone to easily access it. On our flood page, we have informational brochures, FEMA links, insurance information, flood information, evacuation maps, building and development information. And you can see some of the examples of the literature that we have on our website on the right-hand side here. Next, next resource, New Haven Office of Emergency Management resource page. So you can sign up for New Haven alerts here. Again, sign up for New Haven alerts. It's easy. Go to the tiny link before. There's also a link on the Office of Emergency Management page to sign up for New Haven alerts. And there's a hurricane guide and emergency preparedness information there. Some things to know. FEMA has an interactive map service where anyone can identify if their property is in the flood zone. If you live or own a business along along a river or the coast, definitely know whether or not you are in a flood zone and which part of the flood zone you live or work in. That is really important for knowing your flood risk. The city plan department can help you find flood zone locations, depths, and past flood information area. Again, reach out to me if you need help. The maps are sometimes confusing, hard to read. I can help you know exactly where you are on the map and what your flood area is. And we can help you make a plan to prevent flood damage. And I'm going to hand it over to Diane.
Thanks, Jacob. I hope you can, I don't see myself on the side, but I hope either you're seeing me or at least you're hearing me.
Everyone can see you.
All right, cool, good. I just don't, that's almost better that, I don't see myself. So, so just a little bit about the community rating system, also known as CRS. It is a program that's kind of a subset of the National Flood Insurance Program. Currently, every town, believe it or not, in Connecticut participates in the National Flood Insurance Program, which is rare. We're one of the few states where everybody participates. However, for the CRS, we only have 14 towns in Connecticut that participate in the program. It is voluntary. It is, and as it says on the slide, it's for towns that are kind of going above and beyond the minimum standards that FEMA sets, either through initiating different outreach and different other programs, or documenting very detailed what the town is doing. So the planning department is definitely the spearhead of the CRS program in New Haven, but I know they reach out also to and kind of collaborate with emergency management, as Jacob just said, the building department, as Jacob just said, and probably a bunch of other departments to provide the data that FEMA needs to kind of validate the fact of what you're doing in this program. So I can also read off the other towns in Connecticut, just so you have an idea of who else participates in this program beyond New Haven. So Stamford, East Lyme, Guilford, Westport, Newtown, West Hartford, Norwich, Milford, Fairfield, Stratford, Trumbull, and Stonington, both the borough and the town. They're treated differently because they have separate zoning, but both of them participate. So as you can tell, more coastal towns do it than inland towns. It has to do with the fact that they have higher policy counts. It's just more worth it for staff time to participate because it is a lot of work. The fact that towns participate in it, it is, an extra layer of something they have to do. So you should applaud New Haven for, putting the effort in to do this program. So what does it really mean? Basically, when the city participates in this program, the reward on the other side is that residents are getting a discount on those flood insurance premiums that Jacob mentioned. It also encourages, the program in general encourages wise floodplain management. It raises awareness of the community. And for me, I know that the town is kind of focusing on permitting and floodplain management and regulations. So next slide. So what is the discount that you're getting? So New Haven is actually one of only three towns in Connecticut that are at our highest level, class 7, 15% discount. The discount goes all the way up to 45%. There's very few towns in the whole nation that get 45% off. You have to do an awful lot. The other towns in Connecticut that are in that same class are Stamford and the town of Stonington. So, so what do you have to do to participate? So there's a range of activities a town can decide they want to do. It's not a prescribed number of things. It's kind of a menu, and you can pick what you want to do. I know New Haven does open space management. They do stormwater management. They get some credit for dams, higher regulatory standards, and on public outreach. So definitely all the things Jacob mentioned that are on your website, they're in your library, get you points, and also your regulations that are stronger than the minimum. What else? So let's see. So what points are you at? So the class 7 is ranges from 1,500 to 2,000 points, and New Haven right now is at 1,705 points. So you're, dead in the middle of that class. You're strong. You're doing a good job for that. You take a little bit more to get you to the next class. Not that it can't happen, but it gets progressively harder. But I mean, the whole point is you're doing a good job. You're trying to do more than the minimum. Now I'm going to shoot it back to Jacob, and I will take questions now.
Great. Thank you, Diane, for that great discussion on CRS. Of course, that the nuts and bolts of that pertain a little bit more to the alders and board of commissioners that are on this call, but you know, just something that the public may also be interested in to let them know that the city is takes seriously the costs of flood insurance, and also is interested in seeing our property owners not lose life or their valuables in flooding. So let's see if we can go to the next. Okay, so questions and answers. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and we will do our best to answer it between Laura, Diane, and I. And there's a little demonstration of how to raise your hand on the screen right now.
Jacob, I did see that Chris Ozick put a question in the chat box, and I'll just read it out. I'm hoping you might cover hazardous materials located in hazard zones. Is there a plan for a storm surge that matches the hurricane of 1938 with 15-foot surge, excessive rain and wind? So should New Haven have a higher standard than FEMA minimum standards to protect people, property, and aquatics like oysters? Maybe this is not the right forum. Chris, I'll let you chime in if there's anything more you wanted to add there. I'm not sure if you're able to join audio.
Sorry, I'm driving.
Okay. One thing I'll mention that we haven't covered yet is that the city is also currently working on an update to the hazard mitigation plan. This is, again, an update to a plan that's a regional plan, but the city of New Haven has our own FEMA mandated plan that does cover hazard mitigation primarily. It doesn't cover your question on hazardous materials located in hazard zones specifically, but this is a question that's come up a lot with various proposals, proposed developments around New Haven. So some of this is covered by building standards depending on what's proposed, but maybe Diane has additional information that she could add with regard to hazardous materials.
Sure. FEMA doesn't really put a minimum, you know, on, they don't single out hazardous materials, let's put it that way. I know there are a few towns, I think Stamford is one, where they do mention hazardous materials in their regs and make a higher standard. So it is something you guys can consider and do. Sometimes what you maybe want to do is like an inventory first. What are your hazardous material sites in town? I mean, you probably already have this. Emergency management probably already has this due to fire, you know, when they respond. They probably know, have an inventory of those things. So usually what you would want them to do is either elevate them in place, again, put them in a floodproof building, or move them if you knew a flood was coming. That's something you can do. I know our agency also, if you go on our website, and I can give this to Jacob, we have some video, our pollution prevention people have put together a class, like kind of a class, and also some videos, and they're Connecticut specific like videos for commercial businesses and how to kind of handle hazardous waste in a flood zone. So it's more like guidance than it is anything else, but you know, again, you could kind of do it regulatorily if you really wanted to, probably.
Thank you, Diane. And thank you, Chris. We'll definitely look into that and see if that's something that we can take action on in the future, if not right now with the hazard mitigation plan. Do we have any further questions? Yes. Yes, I saw Richard Lyons.
I hope you can all hear me. I've recently driven past New Haven Harbor and the tank farms along the harbor and the rivers. I noticed a huge increase in the density of those tanks, which carry oils. Good question what it is in all those tanks. But it appears to me that this is a huge and growing risk for the citizens of Greater New Haven. And I wonder what FEMA thinks about tank farms like that and what you all do about those and the risk they pose.
I think those have been there for a long time. I mean, I grew up in North Branford, and I remember that when I was a kid there. So part of the tank farms, and I agree with you, you have a dangerous substance there, definitely. They would consider those more like a port facility. So it is allowed. I know there is some, I'm going to call it like walls and mitigation there to try to, maybe dampen the wave action in there, that kind of stuff. But tank, I don't know how I say it in the right way. It's not that it's a necessary evil, but the only other option would be to, again, move that inland, pipe it inland, that kind of thing. But really, again, it's not like you want things like that there, but it's also kind of necessary, unfortunately, because of what it is. It's oil, it's got to be pumped off a ship, it's got to be near the water, that kind of thing. So I think what they try to do is, again, put some barriers to try to flood-proof those tanks so that they can stay in place. Now the density part, I'd have to give that back to city plan. Are they adding more tanks? That I don't know.
I'm not aware that tanks have been added recently, but I will take a look at our records and see what the building plan was and when they were added. Thank you for your question about that.
Yes, thank you, Richard. And stress. You're muted right now.
I just dropped into the chat the link to the EPA toxic inventory. I haven't looked at that this year, in fact, but so I don't know how often it gets updated, but there's one. And there was also, I think it was done back during the DeStefano administration when the city had its first sustainability director. Her name was Christine Tang. And there was a toxic inventory that was published that looked at all kinds of businesses and locations around the city and listed them. So that is probably around somewhere. I'm actually started to look in my old archive here. I'll try to find it, but I think it does go to the question that you've asked about where different kinds of things are. And just one question I had, or maybe two. One was I was interested that there was a pointed suggestion to take care of grass clippings. And when I think of some of the things that we have to deal with in town, like the oil tanks, it seems small, but I'm sure that there's like a real purpose to that. Maybe to try to keep storm drains from being clogged up by leaves and grass clippings. So that's just one question. Thanks.
If you could help me understand what the question was, it was why was it pointed? Why was the grass clippings added?
Not just what is the danger that they pose? Is it about clogging storm drains? Is that?
Yes. Yes, it's leaves,
Yeah.
grass clippings, organic matter from lawns. Also, you know, a lot of different things that could potentially float away and clog up um, storm drains during floods. But yeah, the city does have a pretty robust street cleaning program, but we can only do so much. It's up to property owners to make sure that their properties are free from any organic matter that could potentially clog up storm drains during flooding events.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is a preset list that you work with, but it could be good to add a little detail, like manage materials that can clog storm drains, such as grass clippings, leaves, and even ice dams. You know, I know in the past the city has asked people to go out and try to make sure they don't pile snow from their sidewalk at a storm drain. So, because here in New Haven, grass clippings, you know, it sounds like a little limited, but the point is an extremely important one. So I think if you started with protect and maintain storm drain functioning by keeping leaves, grass, ice, anything out of it, is probably the point. And I agree with Mr. Lyons' point on the tank farms. And, you know, as Diane says, you know, obviously at this point in the world's evolution, oil and other petrochemicals are essential. But we do have the risk that they pose, being in the floodplain, is so enormous and would be so devastating to the city of Eden if them broke that it's really incumbent on us to find solutions like employing more pipelines, finding new locations for tanks outside of the floodplain. So I don't think that the essential character of supplying petroleum in any way outweighs the value of people's lives and safety and both our waterways. So definitely needs some very, very close attention, and not to add to it. Okay, one other question. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of people. So I'm wondering in terms of, in the guide, it said to minimize fill, and some major projects in New Haven, such as the rebuilding of Long Wharf and plans for Tweed, are looking at a lot at using massive amounts of fill. Could you talk about your ideas about this? How is the city looking at that?
Sure. That's a good point. Thank you for your previous points also. The suggestion was to minimize the use of fill as much as possible. I can't speak to the details of the rebuilding of Long Wharf and the Sikorsky. Or sorry, I used to work in Bridgeport. Of the airport, but I hope that they would be reducing the amount of fill as much as possible. I'm not sure if Laura has something to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, all of those developments are reviewed on a case-by-case basis for our inland wetlands regulations. So, you know, the use of fill, the encroachment into inland wetlands areas that clearly serve an important purpose in keeping our waters clean is really important to us. And we have staff that are trained in doing that inland wetland review. So we also review for any movement of materials on site. That's part of our site plan review process. So the Tweed proposal, which is current, there is an application before the City Plan Commission right now for that proposal. That's when we do that review. The plan on Long Wharf, would come through those reviews when there's a particular development proposed. So, there is the Long Wharf Responsible Growth Plan has conceptual plans for what's intended to be there. Unfortunately, Long Wharf was built on fill. The whole area is fill. It was filled in many, many years ago. So, we are currently also reviewing our flood ordinances for adherence to the new updated building code, and are looking at how we secure those areas for future development with the acknowledgement that they're in the flood zone. So all of that has to be accounted for when development is proposed, and we certainly are doing those reviews with diligence.
Yeah. Some of the things that were part of the Mill River study of, I think it was maybe 7 years ago, that was an interesting study because when it started off, the city was really looking at maximizing every square inch of space with development along the Mill River. And then we had one of the superstorms move through. It caused a lot of damage. And it was a real wake-up call. And it was, some of you are new here in the city, and some of your faces are old and familiar faces. So I'll just quickly say what happened. And if you look at that plan, there was this very quick adjustment. It was by the consultants were UTIL, and they brought in a landscape planner that had a lot of background with flood management. And it was very impressive that they quickly responded. But one of the things they recommended along the Mill River was that basically there wasn't enough value in the development that could be done there, even if you maximized it, to justify some of the big things like tide gates. Though the expense of those, the cost benefit analysis wouldn't justify it. And what they recommended was basically for every acre you develop, you commit 1 acre to being natural sponges, that they have native plants, that they are able to receive storm water and hold it until the water levels go down. So that means finding a way to make agreements with property owners about key properties that would be hard to develop anyway, let's say because of underground water systems that are part of them. The Sitcom site is one of those things with underground streams. So that you actually can develop some of the other sites. Because we're landlocked too, so we know that we need to make use of any land that we can, but we also have to protect that. So that could be, if, for instance, there's federal funds and you could strategically think which are the parcels that are really necessary and could give you the most if they were reverted to a natural state. Is there a way that we could use some of the federal money coming through to buy those key things to open up the possibility of more stable lands to be developed? So that would be question, you know, more proactive about this.
That's a great idea. And I like the idea of planning with that in mind, such that, you know, when we're thinking, we have so much green space in the city of New Haven. And I've thought, you know, for our comprehensive plan, it would make so much sense to, as we're thinking forward, to think about those green spaces and the parcels around the city that we want to reserve for green areas as mitigation areas too, for floods, and as inland wetlands and places that can, you know, support our flood mitigation goals and not just recreational, outdoor recreational goals. So yeah, I think that's an incredibly good idea, something we should be doing.
Our plan already does that in a way. You know, I don't think it's really an urban plan at this point, but I think what was accomplished in that plan that was very important was exactly looking at how do you deal with stormwater runoff. And so all of the lacing of, in a way, man-made wetlands that can also function as recreation spaces that make a ring all the way around it. In a way but does the city have control of those parcels that would be very necessary to implement that plan, right? And then Mill River is another thing. There's very key parcels there. So the strategy has been looked at there, you know, which is really, really good. But how to get there is another question. And of course, that's only stormwater. It isn't sea level rise. And the Army Corps of Engineers project is more address, hopefully can address that.
Great. Really good discussion here. We have a typed in chat question from Chris, and he has his hand up also. So I'm not sure if it's the same question or two questions now, but
No, it's the same. It's the same question. Does FEMA do any modeling based on potential storm events and their impacts, not just from flooding, but you know, so let's say one of the oil tanks ruptures and, you know, brings oil throughout all the flooded areas. Do they do any sort of modeling based on what hazards or risk or things that are around there?
So I can tell you that one. So for mapping, for flood mapping, they do look at old past storm events. That's just to make the flood maps. So they're not projecting into the future like with climate change, although there's talk. They take a point in time and take all the data, you know, past. So that way it's like kind of a rolling model. So that's for mapping. So modeling like what's going to happen to the tanks, no. So they don't model, you know, the tanks or anything else like what's going to necessarily happen, you know.
But what about property damage equaling dollars?
Okay, so they do have a modeling program. It's called HAZUS, HAZUS. I think it stands for Hazards US. And again, the planning department might already have it. They can get it. It's free, of course. And it does allow you to kind of what you're describing. It would not just say the tanks, but any, I think you load into it like your assessor's data, you know what I mean? Like your buildings. And then and you can fool around with the model and it'll spit out on the other side expected damages in you know, dollars and stuff like that, and debris and things of that nature. They do have something like that. The tanks would be a tough one. You guys like these tanks because it's an odd, it's not the norm that you see in every town. Do you see what I'm saying to you? It's a little bit of an oddball, you know?
It's very concerning.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yes, I would agree with you.
great. Thank you for.
Maybe the question is better posed to you know, like your officials with, have they inspected those tanks recently? What are mitigation things they put into place? I mean, it's not like they've never flooded before. That might be a better discussion maybe with like the building department to see what if they're rated to, maybe they're rated to a certain storm event. I don't know if that helps you at all.
All right, thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? I'm not seeing any. All right. Well, thank you everyone for spending time with us tonight. We really enjoyed speaking with you about the flood hazards and abilities to avoid those in New Haven. And we really enjoyed your feedback about some of the potential issues here. Thank you, everyone. Let me put my email in the chat for anyone who's interested in emailing me. Thank you very much. We look forward to talking to you in the future. I see one last question from Anstris. You're muted right now.
Will you be sharing this recording like you did?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So the recording will be posted on the city plan flood page that we mentioned before. And if you just Google, look up New Haven city plan flood, it'll be one of the first hits there.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you everyone for spending time with us. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.